So LinkedIn is giving us some strike. This is interesting. Okay. So welcome to our Globuntu Symposium, our first Globuntu Symposium. My name is Ankweta Beatrice Achaleke. I am your host for today. And today I have 4 top global experts gathered around the table. And we are talking today, or the questions that we're answering today is, what is Ubuntu? What is Ubuntu? And how can organizations, individuals, and businesses use it to recover from the COVID-19 pandemic? We know that Africa is the cradle of humankind, and we know that Africa has survived so many calamities, so many catastrophes, some man-made, some natural. We know that we have always stand strong, like a wheat in the wind that bends but never breaks. So, and one of the things that keeps us going is Ubuntu. We all know we all talk about Ubuntu, and today we're here to find out a common understanding, to come up with a common understanding of what Ubuntu is. And my experts of today, they are from the diaspora and from the continent. And I'm so excited about the conversation that we're about to start. And it's going to be a 2 hours conversation. So if you're out there joining us on social media, on Facebook, on YouTube, we welcome you. We salute you. Please take part in the conversation and share your views, ask your questions, and let's do this together. To get us started, I want to read a quote that really got me thinking about this concept of Ubuntu, which has been on my mind for so many years, and I've created a concept known as Globuntu Mind Shift. But today we're not talking about the mind shift, we're talking about the mother concept, which is Ubuntu. And this quote from Steve Biko, one of the greatest sons of Africa, the father of Black consciousness, really got me thinking. He said this: "The great powers of the world may have done wonders in giving the world an industrial and military look, but the great gift still has to come from Africa, giving the world a more human face." So the world has been down on its knees since the beginning of 2020. We have experienced things that we have never experienced before, and it's something that is going to carry us throughout our lives and the generations to come. And now we're trying to get back on our feet. And the question is, Africa being the cradle of humankind, Africa being the second largest continent in the world, the youngest continent and one of the greatest upcoming markets, Africa being that space where we have had so many people come in and out, where resources are at home, where we have people, where we have ideas, where we have the future. So what can Africa contribute to the world as we get back up on our feet? Can Ubuntu be one of those concepts that allowed us to move forward from the pandemic, from the lockdown that we have experienced within the last months throughout the year 2020? So my 4 speakers, there is Dr. Etel from South Africa and Nigeria, We have Mr. Teboho from South Africa. We have Dr. Byron from Georgia, and we have Dr. Blackwook from Florida, wherever she is right now. And again, these are people who are very savvy in the concept of Ubuntu. There are people who work with this concept, people who live with this concept, and I'm so happy that they took all the time to share with us today. So to get us started, I'm going to ask each one of my experts to quickly introduce themselves, and then they're going to have each of 15 minutes to give us their thoughts on what they understand to be Ubuntu. And after that, after we have all the round, we're going to move up to a question and answer round, kind of reflection round, as I call it. So without any further ado, I'm going to pass over the words to Dr. Alecia Blackwook, who is the author of the book called Ubuntu Pedagogy, and she's been doing amazing work when it comes to the curriculum based on Ubuntu. So I will hand over to you, Dr. Alecia. Thank you so much for your time. I know you're somewhere taking care of family. We juggle family and life. I guess that is part of Ubuntu as well. So I'm going to hand over to you, and please introduce yourself and then give us your thoughts about what you understand to be Ubuntu.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Sawubona. I'm here in Florida. It's actually cold in Florida this morning, but I just want to say give thanks for this opportunity to be here. As my dear sister Beatrice said, Alecia Blackwook, I am originally from Jamaica and live in the United States for over 40 years. I think I'm also the youngest one here, so I asked permission from all my elder warrior scholars for permission to speak. And so I give thanks to being a part of this amazing panel. Yes, when we talk about Ubuntu, I just wanted to kind of just share what brought me to this place of understanding Ubuntu from the lens of an educator, and I'll speak from that lens. So it's talking about Ubuntu, I came across this concept as a young teacher in public school in the United States. A professor who studied and lived in South Africa left a message in my class after observing me for a day and said, "You teach in the spirit of Ubuntu." I had absolutely no idea what he was talking about. That was the first time I heard the concept Ubuntu. So that brought me on a journey to study and understand what is this Ubuntu and what did he see in my practices in the classroom for him to make such a statement. And that brought me on the journey to staying in Botswana, Namibia, and South Africa, and really going to, I call it Ubuntu land, to live amongst the people, to really understand it in concept. Because once I go to the writings, I was still not getting a fullness of how do I express, what were the things that he was seeing, what does it look like, what does it sound like. And so that brought me to the journey of spending time in Namibia and Botswana in the schools, really looking to see what is Ubuntu, what was I seeing evidence of Ubuntu there. And so I went on that journey, and it brought me to a fuller understanding to be able to put words and articulate my process of what I was doing. So understanding Ubuntu, taking it from the concept, realizing that it's an all-inclusive worldview with values that are shared across cultures. When we talk about values such as care, compassion, empathy, honesty, respect. So these values I was incorporating in the things that I was doing in the classroom. And so when I really deeper break down the word Ubuntu, I just want to share a diagram of how I break this concept down so that we in the West understand this concept that is coming from the Bantu languages in Southern Africa. How does this make sense to us in the West? And so I came across this diagram that I put together in breaking down Ubuntu as I study it in concept. So when we talk about Ubuntu, the U, as I learned, is the article the. BU is being, and the NTU is human. So the essence of being human. So I had to try to understand, how was I demonstrating that in the classroom? So this is how I define and operationalize Ubuntu so that we in the West can have a deeper understanding. Because what I learned, Ubuntu is not easily defined in an English term. So I had to put together what it means to us. And it brought me back to understanding self. When we talk about Ubuntu, the first part of it is the really understanding self, connecting to the self. Who are you? What are the things that you are doing to make sure that you are showing up as human every day? How do you go about building relationships with yourself and with others? And from the lens of the classroom and working with teachers, helping them to understand that in the essence, you have to make sure that you are unifying the children, explicitly teaching what is unity. So I was very intentional about teaching Ubuntu. What is Ubuntu? So it becomes a part that I integrated in the curriculum that I was teaching. And a big part of it is what I do in the mornings is to what I call morning meetings, or something I learned when I was in Botswana is the kotla. So we sit in circles every morning and really set the tone of the day. And so this is where I nurture the minds of the children. And it's so important that we connect to the spirit of the children. We also look to the point where I teach from a position of love and care. This was something the professor was observing in the classroom. And a couple of years later, he explained to me what he was seeing at that point, because I had a marketplace in the classroom that I tied to the math that I was teaching, to the character development that students were able to earn money and to be able to share in this classroom store. And so there was a sense of community with the children interacting with each other. And this is where teaching from a position of love and care, it connects to not only to what I was doing, but it also helps the children within the context to be able to demonstrate love and connect with each other. And I always get back to the place of utilizing evidence. We have to constantly reevaluate what we are doing, reevaluating everything that we do to make sure that it is the children are being connected to it. We are understanding what we're doing. Is it working? We're talking about, we're in a pandemic right now and we're shifting. There's a lot of shifts going on. Is the homeschooling setup that we have, is it working? What type of learners that we have? And so we talk about Ubuntu, that sense of community, that sense of connectiveness. If we see ones in our community that are struggling, we have to step up to the plate and say, you know what, how can I help my brothers and my sisters? How can I be my brother's keeper? So Ubuntu calls us to come together as a people, to be able to work collectively to make sure that we're bringing forth change. And so this is what I would start with in terms of kind of just giving you a snapshot of Ubuntu and how I operationalize Ubuntu here. Okay. All right, I'm going to turn it back over to Beatrice at this time.
Okay. So thank you for that input, Dr. Blackwood. Thank you so much for sharing that graphic and for giving us the essence of how you live Ubuntu in your classroom. I think what we want to do here is not to bring the theory of Ubuntu, but to bring it right down to the practicable aspect of it. How can we use it in our daily lives? And I think those examples from your class really, really go a long way to take us to that space. And you brought in some values that I picked up, some of the principles. There is love, there is connectivity, there is the circle, which is very important, there is that empathy. It's all about supporting each other and learning with one another. So those are some of the things that I pick up that I would like to bring back to, put on the table for our next presenters, but also as when we move over to our reflection section, I would like for us to kind of look into one of the key principles and the key values of what we consider to be Ubuntu. So thank you so very much. I am going to take us over to our next speaker, and that is going to be Mr. Teboho. So coming from the diaspora, let's come back to South Africa. South Africa is said to be the home of Ubuntu, and Mr. Teboho has been working in different fields of life, from trade union through politics and communication, management in different leadership positions. I would like for you to quickly introduce yourself, please, and then take us to what your understanding of Ubuntu is like, coming from the continent. So, Mr. Teboho, over to you, my brother. Oh, something happened to him.
Hi, I'm back. How are you?
Very well, thank you. Oh, we can't hear you. Can you check your volume, please? Maybe your mic is muted.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Well, thank you so much. My apologies for that. Good afternoon to my brothers and sisters. And as already introduced, my name is Teboho Chaane. I'm from South Africa, residing in Flagstaff, Northwest. I'm quite privileged to be part of this very important discussions around Ubuntu. I grew up in a small village or town called Makwantwang near Stainsres in the Free State, which is about 43 kilometers east of Kroonstad. So, as Beatrice has indicated, that Africa is a home for Ubuntu. I grew up understanding that Ubuntu is a Nguni word meaning humanity. And in my mother's tongue, it is called Botu, which translates the same as Ubuntu. So in my readings, I've learned that many experts and scholars in Africa explained it in different ways, and it is a philosophy that is deeply rooted in values that justify human behavior that affect other human beings. So in a nutshell, Ubuntu is, knows no boundaries, it knows no color, no tribe, no race. It is, I always argue that Ubuntu is actually a matter of the heart. It's something that should come out of every human being automatically from the heart. Now, I would like to take an angle of Ubuntu from the perspective of my mother, as one of the people that instilled the values of Ubuntu in me, which are still a driving force in me today. So in my upbringing, my mother would always talk about Ubuntu or Botu, because I'm a Sotho speaking from the Sotho people. So she would always talk about Botu, which is the same as Ubuntu, and always instill this discipline in us that we must always ensure that our Ubuntu or Botu comes out in everything that we do. as a young man then, it was quite difficult to understand what is this Ubuntu. But according to her explanation or expression of what Ubuntu meant, I concluded then that Ubuntu is a matter of the heart. And therefore, it is something that is found in each and every human being. And it should, out of love, come out automatically in our daily life. And my mother would also narrate stories of how our forebearers used to be and how hospitality was viewed as one of the most sacred customs of Africans, and how important it is to always show compassion to other people. And through observations, one observed as one was growing up, how back then, families would receive visitors, be it friends, strangers, and family alike, and prepare the best evening or lunch meals and place to sleep without any slightest thought that the people that they are hosting might have some sinister motives or do anything extraordinary. And as I started traveling African countries, I would marvel at how African people were so much in love and united with one another, how hospitable they are, how good they will treat each other. They would always show that compassion, that love, that respect, that empathy in everything that you do, something that you wouldn't see in other nations, as I also had the opportunity to travel to Europe and all those other countries, Asia, and so forth and so on. But mostly in Africa, it's where I began, as I grew up, seeing what my mother was instilling to us as young people. And back then, I remember one day when we asked our mother to explain what is this Ubuntu, what is this Ubuntu in simple terms. And she would say, look, in simple terms, all what I'm asking you to do and to live is to love your neighbor as thyself. And her definition of a neighbor was everybody, whether you know the person, whether it's the people around you, whether it's your enemies, whether it's your friends, love them anyhow. The second point that she would raise is do to others what you would want them to do to you. So we grew up knowing that if I want to be treated good and with respect, I must also treat other people the same way. Whatever that I expect from you as a human being, I must give it back to you. And the third point that she instilled in me was the fact that you must always humble yourself in all you're doing. So those were the three simple sentences that she would use to explain in her own way. Mind you, my mother was not educated, but she was deeply rooted in the Bible. She's a religious person. That's why some of the sentences that I've just read now, you would find in the scripture. But I then later in life, particularly during the Truth and Reconciliation, when I was following what was happening, and at some point, I think Archbishop Desmond Tutu, when he explained, and I will quote him, he said, when he was speaking about Ubuntu, he said, my humanity is caught up and is inextricably bound up in what is yours, which was linking, to me, it was linking more and now bringing more understanding to me of what all these years my mother was teaching me, including my observation of how our families then in the small township that I just explained, in the villages in Lesotho, in Tanzania, in Namibia, all those places that I managed to visit, you see people living that kind of life. And I think one of the people who also hammered it home for my better understanding was the former president, the late President Nelson Mandela. And I would also quote him when he was explaining this concept of Ubuntu. He said, in Africa, there is a concept known as Ubuntu. The profound sense that we are human only through humanity of other. That if we are to accomplish anything in this world, it will in equal measure be due to the work and achievement of others. So in the nutshell, if you listen to these two statesmen, they were essentially saying we must forget about our individualism, forget about any ideas or any notion that one person can be successful without the support and the inputs of others. And I know for a fact that throughout my school years, that is what also our teachers, as Dr. Blackwood has also done so in America, as what our teachers were teaching us in school. Although it was difficult times those times, because as everybody would know, back then it was still under apartheid, but through the Bantu education, those of us who went through the Bantu education, we managed to go through that system where respect, where honesty, where loyalty, where compassion, where joy, where conciliation, consensus, and all those other principles were instilled in every one of us. That's then, in my view, giving effect and proper context to what Beatrice quoted from Steve Biko as saying, Africa then, with its humanity, must bring to give to the world a more human face. I think Biko was, as a visionary himself, he was also prophetic in saying that, because he, like all other people, never knew that there will be times like this in our lifetime where we are all faced with this pandemic called COVID-19 that has caused so much panic and fear in the whole world. We know, I wouldn't dwell much into the lockdown measures that were applied all across the globe as a way of trying to contain and bring stability and certainty in the world. But I think Biko was more prophetic, because today, in my view, if you listen to all the world leaders from World Health Organization, from the judiciary, from politicians, and you'll find that everyone seems to be pointing to one direction and one direction only, that the only way forward as we come out of COVID-19, because at least there is hope that we will get out of COVID-19, whether it will disappear the same way it came, or there will be cure that will be found, or there will be vaccine, or whatever it is that will happen. But the truth of the matter, or the fact of the matter, is that we will get out of this valley. And we have seen that through the acts of nature, we are beginning to defeat this monster. And if you hear what world leaders are saying, I want to make a quote from Dennis Snower of Global Solution Initiatives in terms of what he presented to the G20 countries summit in April this year. He said, the coronavirus shows us how terrible it is to waste our lives embroiled in endless battles for wealth and status power. How terrible it really is not to recognize the value in the people around us, not just our family and friends, not just colleagues and fellow citizens, but also complete strangers. How terrible it is not to give our lives meaning every hour of every day by honoring the sacredness of life according to all living things, the respect, sensitivity, and the care that they deserve. The COVID-19 pandemic demonstrates to us the value of freedom to move, to be with those we love, to live in dignity and security for ourselves and those around us, from loved ones to refugees and downtrodden. Above all, it shows us the importance of recognizing the true purpose of our business and economies, our political parties and governments, our local associations and international organizations, our conventions, ideologies, and all our systems, namely to serve the needs and purpose, to serve human needs and purpose. Now, that submission at that body, the G20, the G20, with all of us understanding what the G20 says, to me, I think Dennis Noah was spot on. And he observed the reality, which is the reality of what us as Africans have been living over the years. And I hope I'm still within time, Beatrice. 1 minute. Oh, 1 minute. Thank you. So to sum it up, you see that what I have narrated and what Dr. Blackwook has also narrated, including the quotes from both Biko, Desmond Tutu, and what I said my mother taught me. There are three things that stand out, and those three things are love, compassion, and humility. And I think as we put the face, as Africa, we must lead by instilling these values that were eroded by all these changes that came up as the economies were open, as there were free international movement, and so on and so forth. I think I will pause there because of time. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, my brother. We begin to see the connections, the connecting points, going from what Dr. Alecia, our sister Dr. Alecia, presented to what you just presented, brother. And I'm curious about where the conversation is going to. At the same time, before I get to our sister Dr. Ether, I want to quote some other great people, some people that have been before us. And I'm very, very, very keen about what they said, what they observe, and what they say. So Rosa Parks, for example, says, I believe there is only one race, the human race. And she continues by saying, it takes more than one person to bring about peace. It takes all of us. People need to free their minds of racial prejudice and believe in equality for all and freedom regardless of race. It would be a good thing if people will be treated equally, justly, and not to be discriminated against because of their race, religion, or anything. And Dr. Kwame Nkrumah says, I believe strongly and sincerely that with the deep-rooted wisdom and dignity, the innate respect for human lives, the intense humanity that is our heritage, the African race, united under one federal government, will emerge not as another world bloc to flaunt its worth and strength, but as a great power whose greatness is indestructible because it is built on one fear, on fear. It is built not on fear, envy, or suspicion, nor one on the expense of others, but founded on hope, trust, friendship, and directed to the good of all mankind. So the reason why I share this with you is because I want us to see that where this Ubuntu is, how it was understood by the past generation, how we are understanding it, and where we can lead it to. I want us to get to the point where we can see how can we embrace and shape Ubuntu to meet with our current needs. Where do we have to shift our minds from what it has been to where it should be, because the world is evolving. Okay, so I just want us to bear that in mind as we continue the conversation, and along the line I will keep sharing the thoughts. But before I share that, I would like to give the word over to our sister, Dr. Ether, to bring in her thoughts about what she understands from Ubuntu. Dr. Ether, you hail from Nigeria, you live in South Africa, you are very diverse in the things that you do. You are an author, a publisher, you are an academia, And you just published a book. The title is about the future of work. That's the summary, but I think you tell us a little bit about that. So what is your understanding of Ubuntu coming from, from Nigeria, from Western Africa to Southern Africa, and what role does that play in your work? What are the similarities? Do you see any similarities between what our forefathers were saying and what our sisters from the diaspora and our brother from South Africa are saying?
Thank you so very much. Thank you, everybody, for having me in your space. I thank my colleagues from the US, my brothers from South Africa, Beatrice, my sister from Cameroon, and we are all Africans. That's a song that says, no matter where you come from, as long as you're a Black man, you're an African. And I welcome my fellow Africans who are watching from far and near, and our brothers of color, and sisters, brothers and sisters of color. I am a Nigerian born in the eastern part of the country. East is where the sun rises. So we have a lot of wisdom because the sun visits us first and we see what the day brings. That's a joke. And I grew up in a village called Ogada, very small village. And we are told that when they tell you a parable, proverb, and interpret it for you, the dowry they paid for your mother is a waste. So we were taught to be wise, to dig inside all the time, growing up. And it was there I learned that the difference between a human being and a beast is that when a human being is itchy at the back, it's difficult for your hand to reach your back. There is something we do. And if an animal or a beast is itching, there is something the beast does. The beast will go to a tree to try to scratch the back, but a human being will run to another human being to help them scratch their back. And that is Ubuntu. We didn't know what Ubuntu was. They didn't give it a name in Nigeria. But I saw me growing up in the midst of it. We were taught that a child is born by a family, but it was raised by the community. So we were taught that when we went to school and came back and there's no food in our mother's pot or in the kitchen, we should go to our neighbor's place and see what they left for the kids. So we grew up understanding that my brother, I could call Beatrice my sister because she's my sister, because we share blood and blood is red in every matter, in everybody. So I was raised to know that my brother, my sister cares for me, whether I know it or not. So, and that was where I grew up. I saw people grow from my village, from nothing to become great because they had support from family, from the community, from even the people that didn't know them. I went to school when my father was broke, when I was to go to secondary school, and there was no money. I went to school because my father had a friend who is not from my village, he's not even from my town. He just went and told him, my child can't go to school. He said, no, your child is intelligent. I will pay the fees. He only had to pay once, and my father paid the rest. I just said that to say that Ubuntu is what we live every day, is a collective life that makes us understand that no matter where we are, who we are, as long as we have breath in our nostrils and we have blood running in our veins, that we may be the life support that another human being may need, but we have to make ourselves available. Now, before I go down to what I really wanted to say about Ubuntu, I want to take a perspective from my book, The Future of Work, Work Family Satisfaction, and Employee Well-Being in the Fourth Industrial Revolution, plus the post-COVID environment or the post-COVID era. Now, you can't talk about Ubuntu if you don't understand family. Family began, but before family came up, according to the scriptures, the Bible, there was work. God created work before he brought forth the woman to give to Adam. So work began, though it was not paid. God actually told Adam, if you till the ground, you will eat and keep it. So there was work, which Adam had to take care of. Then God brought a woman into Adam's life. And then there was a family. So work and family are related. And work and family are like two legs, the 2 feet of a human being. They walk together. You cannot lift one up and leave the other behind. And the world we are in today has fast changed and it's still changing and impacting our family and our work. The work that we do today is different from the work that was done last year. The space of change and the rate of change and the spacing of it is so fast that people are struggling to catch their breath. I have this long slide I had prepared to present, but nevertheless, let me just follow the cues from Dr. Alecia and Mr. Teboho. I want to just go the way they went, but nevertheless, let me just give it a perspective. When we understand work and the changes and challenges that are coming upon the work and how that will impact our families and our individuality and humanity, then we'll be able to practicalize or operationalize Ubuntu in a way where, whether we're at home in the family setting or we're at work, we'll be able to live as humans, as Africans, as the cradle, people from the cradle of humanity. I like the way Beatrice puts it. It's always very nice when it comes from her mouth. Okay, now, a lot of stress was ongoing in the workplace before we began to think about the fourth industrial revolution. The fourth industrial revolution, we were made to understand, was coming faster than Africa could handle it. But when I went to Washington, I realized that actually we were very far behind. And we didn't even have the infrastructure to go ahead and face the fourth industrial revolution that had come elsewhere globally in Africa. So when I came back to Africa, I decided I was going to write the book on future of work, because I saw that if we're not going to wake ourselves up about what is going to come on us, not knowing that COVID-19 was going to come, bring it faster than I thought, I knew that if we didn't arrange ourselves and bring our humanity to bear on the future that is come upon us, we are going to be lagging behind again, like we did in the first, second, and third industrial revolutions. So I thought of employee wellness in the days of the fourth industrial revolution and the post-COVID environment. How are we going to survive? The fourth industrial revolution came with a lot of noise. You know, there's a nature of occupations that are going to change, and all the other things that we knew they will cease. The things we knew to exist before the fourth industrial revolution, they will change. The workforce, the employees setting, as we know it presently, will be replaced by humanoids and artificial intelligence. We also know that in the fourth industrial revolution, new jobs and areas of specialization will do not exist. They will spring forth and be relevant considering the major changes that are underway, even they have come upon us anyways. And a new set of skills will be required. About 1/3 of skills, 35% to be precise, that are important in today's workforce, in 5 years' time, they would have changed. And this is said by a scholar called Gray in 2016. Now, we currently live in an age of high skills instability across all occupations, types, and industrial sector. So the growth in robotics, humanoids, machine learning, genomics, artificial intelligence, 3D printing, biotechnology, just to name a few of them that I know, are disrupting the current business processes, decreasing the shelf life of employees' skill. And if we do not do anything about this, these things, in addition to the challenges that were already impacting on the well-being of employees and their satisfaction with their work and family situations, the emergence of the COVID pandemic in 2020, if we do not take care of those things in this era of the fourth industrial revolution, which has brought upon us new ways of life and new ways of working, we are surely going to stay in the background. I am taking us to where I can now bring in where Ubuntu comes in. Many people now work from home. What is the implication of this on home? The sofa, the chairs, the settees we have at home, we are not made to carry all day long weight. Most people work from their couches. Many people, their couches have depressed. The aesthetics in the house, everything has changed. Children are schooling from home. What is it going to do to us? Now, working from home has both positive and negative impacts on ourselves, and the spillover from work to life to family, if we do not also attend to it, will affect the well-being of our children, our husbands, ourselves, and even our neighbors. So, how do we help one another? Okay, how do we get out of the situation that we have found ourselves? Okay, what I want to say is that if we think that the fourth industrial revolution, some people say, no, they will create more jobs. Yes, There will be more jobs, but there will be less jobs, because the more the jobs, the more skills you require that you don't have, your skills become obsolete. You will need to reskill, upskill, or deskill. And that is very dangerous, okay? Now, the discussion I've had so far, I'm just trying to summarize what I wrote that is very, very detailed, okay? In the context of what I have spoken about, okay? The era we're in poses a lot of threats. There are opportunities. I will not undermine the opportunities. And I'm not here standing as a prophet of doom, but I want to say to every African who is listening and who will listen that we are in an era that poses a lot of threats. I mean, threats. Don't worry, I'm from Nigeria. You can understand what I'm saying. Threats, as in THREATS, and creative opportunities. Okay. Now, various possible outcomes are being predicted by expert futurists, including unemployment. There will be over 80% unemployment. Stable job numbers will increase, but unstable jobs will be available, according to the United Nations in 2018. And workers using information technology and social media to mobilize the workforce to mass action will be the order of the day. This was said by SourceWatch in 2017. Now, there are threats to workers and future of work, threats to skill, threats to family by technoference. Technoference is technology interfering in the family. People work in the bedroom, in the toilet, in the kitchen, and people in relationships, children don't have their mothers or their fathers' ears because they are tending to work. That is a threat to what we know as the family. That is a threat that will cause ill health. And that is a threat that could make many people exposed to ill health to lack support if nothing is done. There will be threats in the way we communicate. People would rather talk to you, chat on the phone, than call you or visit you these days because of social distancing from the COVID-19 regulations. Now, there's a threat to the way we live, the way we work, and the way we relate. People will not be too close as they used to be, no matter how we do it. People will still be afraid because the fear in the environment is palpable. So with these threats coming on all humanity, the well-being of individuals are going to be threatened also. What are we going to do? What is the future of families in Africa, families all over the world, especially those families that are lagging behind with respect to prosperity? In the face of all of this, I believe that bringing and harnessing our Ubuntu as Africans, like I said, will help us. To me, Ubuntu is a network. I see Ubuntu like a tree. The tree needs the root. The roots cannot survive alone without the branches. The branches cannot stand without the stem. The fruits cannot hang on the stem. They hang on the roots. They grow. There's a network. And the branch cannot say to the stem, I am the one that carries the fruit, I don't need you. And the root cannot say to the tree, I am the root, nobody sees me, so I'll stop supplying the nutrients. No, Ubuntu is just like that. Although we are individuals walking about, we have an interdependence that connects us, that if I can help you, you will be the one to help me tomorrow. That is what we know as Nigerians. We are brought up to say that. Now, let me just conclude by giving us a story. An archaeologist is a popular story on the internet. They said an archaeologist went to study about Africans and Ubuntu. And she threw a bait on African children. Many African children were playing around her. And she bought a basket of candy and put it under a tree. And then called the kids together and said, the first person to get to the tree, I will give the person this basket of candy. And okay, she now did on your marks, get set, go. To her surprise, the kids held each other and started running together. And when they ran and got to the basket, grabbed the basket and shared the fruit, the candy, and all of them ate it and they were happy. The archaeologist was surprised. Why did you do that? And the kids answered the archaeologist. They said, how can one of us be happy eating all the candy when all of us will not be happy? And that means that if one of us is unhappy, all of us are unhappy. So to avoid being unhappy at all, they had to run together. That is Ubuntu. So why did I say that? A lot of people, based on the present day situation, the pandemic and the fourth industrial revolution that Africa is struggling to catch up with, a lot of people will lose their jobs. So many families will be out of accommodation and may not have food. Many people will develop mental ill health because they lost their job, or they are required to upskill or reskill, or their skill has become irrelevant. Many people will develop mental ill health. Many people will need counsel. Many people will have no place to go and cry, no person to cry to. The future of work as we know it is very uncertain. What should we do? How are we going to help ourselves? How do we carry our brothers and our sisters along? I say it is by Ubuntu. I am because you are. That is the spirit of Ubuntu. So in conclusion, 1 minute, Beatrice, work as we know it has changed forever. Certain careers like we know them today will not be needed in the near future. There will be need to de-skill, reskill, and upskill. These will cost money, energy, and time. The impact of impersonality in our relationships, we are supposed to maintain social distancing. It will affect our interpersonal relationships at home and at work, and we may not be qualified to handle the impact. The effect of work-family satisfaction can never be seen anymore if we don't do something. Now, the question about leadership and followership in the workplace, where humanoids will be working and deciding, and humanity will be kept behind, is a problem that needs to be addressed. Employee well-being will be very well challenged. The need at this time is that we should think humanity, think life, think blood, and think Ubuntu. Thank you very much.
Wow, that is so powerful. That is so powerful, and I really, really love the analogy of the tree. You know, it shows us how interdependent we are when it comes to the humanity that we're talking about. There are a couple of insights that I'd like to bring, but before I get there, I'd like to jump to Dr. Wilson, because I want us to have all the thoughts on the table, and then we start, you know, breaking it together. Because from your input, my sister, Dr. Ether, there's so many questions that come into my mind. Okay, in terms of all the changes that we're experiencing in the workplace, where is the humanity going to be, and how do we bring it in? How do we maintain it? How do we nurture it? But we'll come to that a little bit later. I'd love to go to our brother, Dr. Wilson, and then, you know, just pose the question. Humanity, everywhere we're hearing about humanity. Africans have this way of, you know, the hospitality. We've seen what hospitality has done on the continent ever since time immemorial, from the colonial time, enslavement, neo-colonialism, racism everywhere. We've seen how Africans have been treated outside of the continent and even within the continent. Now, the question is Ubuntu the way we understand it? Is that the Ubuntu that will help us post-COVID-19? Or what is the kind of Ubuntu that we should be thinking about? My brother, Dr. Wilson, what is your understanding of Ubuntu? What are the shifts that we need to make so that Ubuntu becomes a concept that fits into the times that we're in, you know, the context that we're in, and the challenges, some of which our sister, Dr. Etta, just mentioned. So over to you, brother. Please introduce yourself.
Sure. Thank you for having me. Yeah, I'm glad to be here. I'm Byron F. Wilson, founder of the Wilson Academy, also founder of the How We Fight movement, and I do some other things. So I'll kind of get right into it. So the general premise, I am because we are. I think we're kind of clear on what Ubuntu is. But there is an implicit problem that Ubuntu creates that needs to be addressed. The challenge with Ubuntu is that it assumes humanistic integrity. That's always been the challenge. It assumes a certain humanism that would exist from any human we encounter, i.e. enters colonialism. This is what has allowed colonialism to infest the continent and abroad. So what I would suggest is that we would need a revamped version of Ubuntu and actually a clearer understanding of the totality of the concept itself. There's a phrase that I use often: "Don't take my kindness for weakness." And I think not only has our kindness been taken for weakness, but it has actually been perceived to be weakness and executed as weakness. When you talk about colonialism, Ubuntu, it's the concept of love and humanity. And you can see that we weren't prepared to encounter such a demonic behavior. When we encountered the white man, he didn't operate with a conscience that we were used to. We would not have assumed that anyone would have exhibited the barbaric, demonic behavior that they do on a regular basis. And so we were ill-prepared, holding on to the Ubuntu principle. So we would need a revamped version of what that actually is, one that focuses exclusively on us. Exclusivity is not a bad word. We've been taught intentionally that it is when everyone else is doing it. So let me explain. So if you look at it, the African is the one that's suffering all over the world. It doesn't matter where. If you go to the US, you go to Brazil, you go to Europe, it doesn't matter. The African is suffering uniquely, exclusively. And so when I say these things, I bear in mind it may sound extreme, but I think we would all agree that our condition is extreme, and to assume that you can solve an extreme problem with a non-extreme solution is asinine. So we talk about what would be necessary in this unity. You would need a true African diaspora. So I'm here, I guess, somewhat representing with my sister as well, in Florida, United States. And it can be embarrassing if you're looking at some of our media. For whatever reason, Black America has decided to select rappers as leaders. I have no idea where that's coming from. But you see some of the selfishness that you would notice from some of our Black American celebrities because they don't know Ubuntu. They're thinking about themselves. They're capitalists. And so they're making these comments that are horribly influential and negative to the general premise of what it is that we need to do. But that's why it's a selfishness. Here's what the first thing that needs to happen. I say this all the time. We would need to discard and deflect all that is not African. Again, we need to discard and deflect all that is not African. As you know, I'm either in the United States or, for the most part, Joburg. I'm there quite a bit, and I see the influence, and I despise it. Now there's a Real Housewives of Johannesburg. The shows that you're mimicking, some of the hairstyles that you're mimicking, some of our music that you're mimicking, I deflect it at all costs. Because what has happened is it's by design. The first thing is they've created a super consumerism. It's teaching us that our value is to show others that I'm equal to you because of the material things that we also can possess. You have a Benz, I can get a Benz, so now I'm equal to you. So even when these companies disrespect us, we still buy the Gucci, we still seek the Nike, we still seek these things even when they have no respect for us, are blatantly disrespectful. The challenge is that colonialism teaches us to admire and mimic our colonizers. And whether you accept this or not, it's been done to you subconsciously. So we've got to discard those concepts, and it's difficult. And here's something that you're not going to like. You've also got to accept the factual history of Christianity. Now, I know this is going to be a soft spot for some people, but please understand that I'm coming from a historical aspect. So I'm not really arguing the philosophy. I'm arguing history, which is kind of difficult to argue. So, number one, understand Christianity and the colonization are one and the same. And they didn't come to save your soul. They came to take your resources. You could separate the two if you like, but I don't see how you can. Because religion is an effective way to control a large group of people. Now, I know that you would like to separate the religion from the man. The problem is men created religion. You were born with a relationship with your maker. A man told you how to foster that. So you can't really separate the two. The problem is that, and particularly when it comes to colonialism, this version of a religion, its core is designed to install and sustain white supremacy. That's the problem. I say what you like, but that's the design. And in fact, when you talk about the brothers and sisters that are here from the Middle Passage, the first ship is called the good ship Jesus. These are undeniable facts. Christianity sanctioned slavery. I'm not condemning God. I'm condemning an institution whose design was to implement and sustain white supremacy. And so if you're not going to address that, I don't know how we can move forward in a positive direction. It's hard to swallow, but you have to. So it's designed, when you give someone an image of God, and people can say what we want. I find it interesting. A lot of times in our communities, we say, well, we recognize, when you read scripture, we recognize that Jesus, who said his skin was brown, but all the pictures in your church, he's white. And all the common images, God is white. And that's so that you can subconsciously believe that they're greater than you. It's deeper than that. If that wasn't the issue, then you would see all of these different images of God and Jesus, but you don't now, do you? So here's the thing. We have to understand, we're being taught that our reward is in heaven. And to some degree, yes. But what about now? And see, so Ubuntu is not just about making sacrifice and taking everything lying down. It's about us working together and loving each other enough to prioritize each other. That's what we have lost. That's what we have lost. So we can't keep walking around talking about forgiveness, loving your neighbor, turning the other cheek, but nobody else is doing that. There's a reason. I don't know how much you guys know about. Okay, so here, there's a federal holiday for Dr. King, right? Because at the time before he was killed, and actually, my belief is the reason he was killed is he was coming a lot more like Malcolm X. If you read his literature closer to his time of death, he was talking more about separation and Black economics. The reason you see Dr. King promoted is because they've taken the narrative of turning the other cheek. They've taken the narrative of integration and coming together. Well, that's because we're 12% of the population here. When we come together, we're just staff. When you come together with the dominant party, there's no equality. You're just staff. That's what they want. They want our consumer dollars. They want to take our best and brightest. So what I'm saying is, you don't see, there's a ton of schools named after Dr. King. There's a federal holiday. There's a lot of streets. You don't see the same thing for Malcolm X, because what Malcolm X is talking about is, here are the things that are directly impacting our community. Here are the ways that we need to directly focus on our resources and build within ourselves. Now, for those of you who are in South Africa, you know, even in education, see, everyone else is doing it. And we've been tricked into focusing on everyone as a group. That's the beauty of the African person. We love humanity, but sometimes you have to learn how to play the game. Look at the schools. There are Turkish schools. There are Jewish schools. The Indians go to school by themselves. The Chinese go to schools by themselves. We're the only ones talking about diversity. You know what diversity is? Diversity means we'll take your best and brightest and use them as our resources. That's what it means. I have Black schools. So I have a Black school here in Atlanta. I don't have any white students. You know why? Because they don't apply. But I can go to any elite white private school and I can find a ton of Black kids, because there's no reciprocity, because we've been taught that everything that they have is better. So if we're going to talk about Ubuntu, the first thing we would need to do is learn to love Black and prioritize Black. We have to prioritize it. Now, the Ubuntu concept, where that comes in, is us being on the same page in a true African diaspora and exclusively supporting us. So, and that's been the challenge, is it's been so spread and been about humanity, but is it humanity that's suffering? If you've been paying attention to what's going on, what my sister there from Nigeria, look at SARS. SARS is no different than the police killing us in the United States. We've been protesting all throughout COVID. White people are not being killed by the cops. They get pulled over. I could show you a video of a white man. He's going towards the cops with a knife. They're moving back, asking him to stop. Black people are getting shot in the back with no weapons at all. So how can we be talking about humanity right now when humanity isn't suffering. Black humanity is suffering. So I would think we would focus on Black humanity. So my point is, if we're going to talk about Ubuntu as an African concept, let it be that. So how do you do that? So here's the thing. If you're not going to discard certain colonial concepts, you would at least need to be clear on what it is and adapt it. And when we get in this conversation about Christianity and some of these colonial concepts, fine, do you. If it helps you to become a better person, great. But let's not pretend it's something it's not. And so the reason you need to recognize that is so that when you see these components of Christianity that would hinder our growth as a community, you would need to make a staunch adaptation to that methodology. Otherwise, we'll continue to be colonialized. So here's the thing. So if you look at what would have to happen, you talk about after COVID-19, and actually COVID-19 is a blessing in disguise because it forces us to focus on need and what really matters. So here are the 4 components, and I'll wrap up because other people have to speak and we have to get in this discussion. Education is the first thing. That's number 1. We have to educate ourselves. You don't know your history. You don't know who you are. How can you know where you're going if you don't know where you came from? Mm-hmm. And if we don't control our own education, even when you have a Black school, if it's taught by white people, it's not a Black school. Number 2, healthcare. So we have our own needs. We have our own. Here in America, the reason that Black people are so obese is because our bodies aren't designed to process the types of food that they're giving. I love when I get to go home to Africa because I can eat clean. But we're dying here just by salt and sugar. Then that's part of it is food, but controlling your own resources. You're talking about many of the countries in Africa, the food is like, you look at Liberia, the rice is made there, but shipped there and then sold back to them. Like, what is that? So, and then banking, our own financial institution. For those of you who are familiar with Gaddafi, the reason Gaddafi was killed in Libya is because he was trying to make an African currency, one united African currency backed with actual natural resources, unlike the US dollar, which is actually explicitly backed with what they call US confidence, which means nothing at all. It means we just keep dumping money into the stock market and people believe in its growth. So what I'm talking about is these are some real things. So yes, we need to love each other. Yes, we have that humanistic concept. But okay, once we've established that, there's some actual work that needs to be done, and it's got to be exclusively focused on us and our own community. There you go, that's it.
Thank you so much. Thank you for this input. I think I said we were in for a thought-provoking conversation, and this is what it is. And I agree with you. My brother, Dr. Wilson, that we need Black humanity. We need exclusivity without apologies. And you talked about history. Before we get into the conversation, I'll take you back to history because, I write a book series called Africa for Smart Kids. And the essence of that book series is just to unleash our history from the perspective of a Black mother, a Black woman, a proud African woman. So we get to understand where we come from. We get to understand what has been, what kind of glory has been. And in relationship to humanity, I think I read a couple of the quotes to you. Now, let me take you to what some other great people are saying from the diaspora and the continent when it comes to Black exclusivity with the concept of humanity and, we thinking about who we are and being there for us. So Bob Marley, for example, Bob Marley says, if the Negro is not careful, he will drink in all the poison of modern civilization and die from the effects of it. And that's exactly what you said with regards to the food, right? So Mr. John Henry Clark, whom I respect, he just has a way of saying things in a way that every kindergarten child can understand. So this is what he says. The cruelest thing that slavery and colonization did to the Africans was to destroy their memory of what they were before foreign contact. And he says, white people think that when you love yourself, you hate them. No, when I love myself, they become irrelevant to me. And I think that's something that we have to bear in mind. We always think we have to be, we have to be welcoming, we have to be accepting, we have to accept everyone. We have to, and this, I'm not saying we shouldn't be hospitable, we shouldn't be compassionate, we shouldn't be all of that. But the question is, where does it start? Where does it start? I think it's Toni Morrison who said, be careful when a naked person gives you a dress. And Mr. Henry Clark also said, to control a people, you must first control what they think about themselves and how they regard their history and culture. And when your conqueror makes you ashamed of your culture and your history, he needs no prison walls to hold you in chains. Mm-hmm. I think these are some of the, he says, Africa is our center of gravity, our cultural, spiritual, mother, father, and our beat heart, no matter where we live in the face of the world. And I think these are some of the words that these great thinkers, these great philosophers, but these great intellectuals, these people who understood history from a perspective, people who have lived some of the things that we're still about to live, when they leave these words behind for us, for me, they are like a torchlight. What are they saying? Where did we derail? Where do we have to pay attention? What do we have to focus on? What do we have to prioritize? And again, coming from the pandemic, which is a blessing in disguise, or whatever it is, it gives us the chance and the space to rethink who we have been, how far that has brought us, and to re-strategize or rethink where we are going. Where are we going now? What are we going to leave behind? What are we going to take with us? What do we have to amplify? What kind of values do we have if the future of work is going to change? And we're working from home and all the things, and technology is coming in. Where is humanity? Where are the limits to humanity? Where do we start and where do we end as Black people? Do we have the right to love ourselves? Can we love ourselves without being apologetic? Can we say, we do Black? And I'll read one more quote for you from Marcus Garvey. He said, be Black, buy Black, think Black, and all else will take care of itself. And I think we all know who Marcus Garvey was and the idea that he had when it came to Black people. So I have you four here. There's so much that we need to talk about. And this conversation is just the start of a series that we're having. In the first week of December, we're going to have another 1 week where we focus on different areas of life. How do we operationalize Ubuntu in those areas? How do we bring it into our, those areas of life? And those of you who are joining in, we thank you for the conversation. Thank you for joining in. Please send in your questions, send in your contributions as you've been doing as we move to the round of question and answers now. Now, I will just drop a question in the circle, and any one of you can just pick it up. Where do we go from now? Where do we go from now? What kind of Ubuntu do we need, and how do we put it in action? How do we make it practicable? I just dropped the question. Let's see who wants to answer that first.
I will answer from, I like to live by example. So the first component I mentioned was education and taking control of education. So we'll be opening a school in Soweto next January. It would have been this January, but COVID kind of forced a lot of start over work with the Gauteng Department of Education there. But also in September, we'll be opening a school in Ghana, not far from Accra. And so I think it starts with actually doing the work, actually saying, here are the components that we need to control and improve. And those are two examples of some of the many things that we'll be working on. But there's actual work that has to be done. And then the first thing is controlling resources. The future, which is young people, is the greatest resource that we have. And so if we don't start taking control of education, then it's kind of all a waste of time. And then also the bigger concept is understand that you're at war. How can you, we're running around as if we're not being attacked, but I know that you feel the pain. I know that you can feel this pain. So you've got to recognize what's really happening, and you fight. You fight. I think people have things confused. And I know that some of you are Christian, so I'll give you biblical examples. So we always focus on the love and compassion components of the Bible, but that's because that's what your colonizers wanted you to focus on. If you think about Moses, one part of Moses is leading his people out of Egypt, escaping the suffering. But what were those people doing when they were roaming around in the desert? They weren't roaming around, they were killing people and taking their land. If you talk about David, one of the greatest kings of all time, according to the Bible, David killed a lot of people. And in fact, the most popular story of David is about him killing a giant and cutting his head off and raising it for his people to see. So there's a component of war and peace that creates a necessary balance, particularly because if God loves us, as we know that he does, and if we love us, which remains to be seen, then we must preserve our own lives. God helps those who helps themselves.
Thank you very much.
I will take it from the position of education as well. It's back to your question in terms of, where do we go from here? And I think it's so important that the education that we are providing for our children, making sure that it is an African-centered education, an education for liberation. What does that look like when it goes into our classes and in preparing our children for the 21st century and beyond? Our children are the greatest resource that we have. So we have to make sure that we're intentional, we are systematic in how we are approaching it, and not just leaving it up to chance, but to be intentional about what we're teaching them. We know that our culture is our cure, so we have to make sure that we're teaching them about their African values. And I think all schools should have the ancient values of the Mahat embedded in how they teach, teaching the children about what is true, justice, reciprocity, balance, order. What does that look like for us as Africans? And as my brother said, Black humanity matters. So we have to step back and make sure that we are intentional about the way that we're educating our children and that we're preparing them so that they can be critical thinkers and problem solvers to solve some of the problems that we create and leaving for them to figure out. So it all goes back to the type of education that we are setting them up for to make sure that they're successful, to carry on this legacy.
Thank you so much.
May I contribute?
Yes, please go, sister.
Thank you so much, a brother from the other side, and then my sister. I find us like people that are caught in the crossfire. We have a youthful generation that are called the internet generation. Some people call them the millennials. They have been educated in a way. I think we should have a concerted strategy to arrest the same youth that we say are the wealth of Africa. We have to have concerted mindset reorientation strategies for our young people, because right now we have a generation that is trained outside because the family is broken down. We have a generation that are baby mothers. They are mothers, but they are babies, they are children. In South Africa, where I live, there are mothers that are 13 years, 14 years, and you want to talk to them, they'll tell you, you're not my mother. There are children that don't have anybody to talk to them. Now, if we must get Africa right, we must start from where Africa started. Africa is known as the cradle. If we are the cradle, that means that we are mothers and we have family. The breakdown of the families is the breakdown of everything we stand for, whether we are Christians, Muslims, Hindus, or atheists. The family is the strength of any culture. You see, I looked at the issue of divorce. I am not anti-divorce. I'm not pro-divorce. I'm nothing, anything. I just don't believe that people should die in a relationship that is unmanageable. But I know that the principles that is guiding the family we have today is not African. The African family is the strength of the African. I am Igbo. The pride of the Igbos is the marriage of families that we have. An Igbo child will go anywhere in the world and hustle because she or he wants to make the family proud. Initially, we had this concept of, if you're caught stealing, know that I'm not your father or your mother. We were taught values at home, not in school. Mm-hmm. Now, when the family is completely broken down, how do we teach our children? You go to school and teach them. The wicked people infiltrated schools and taught our children to rebel against us. And then we don't have homes to correct those kids. They're out there. They are waiting to explode. So we must think the youth. How do we get them and reorientate their minds? The definitions, the things we call success, today in Africa, they are the things that our fathers and mothers will be ashamed of. The things we define as prosperity, or that we've made it, they are the things that our great-grandparents will turn in their graves if they hear that that is what we're doing. So if we talk education and our education does not have content that is written with values for human life, values for the family, respect for God, whether he's white, black, or Indian, as long as your heart is connected to this God, as long as we understand that we didn't create ourselves, the values that we have that are crafted in understanding, like you said, I believe in African. If you say African help or African Ubuntu, I am close to my brother, my sister, my neighbor, who is African. What Ubuntu says is, your neighbor will not be sick in the night and you're hearing them groan, whether they are white, Asian, or colored, and you keep quiet. It will kill yourself. That will not leave you. That is not anybody teaching you you're right or wrong. We must have, and we must get it right. If not, we'll raise a bunch of barbarians. We must sit down and draft our curriculum in the way it ought to be drafted. While men slept, some people integrated godlessness, fear of evil, and unrighteousness into our educational curriculum and deviated this generation of young people. A young person can wake up today and tell you, I'm going to kill that person. And if they come to you as a counselor, you know you can't talk. And if you think they will even come back and kill you, you are in a dilemma. So what do we do with the youth? We have an African population that is so strong. Look at what they did in Nigeria. I wish that continued in the grace that they had to push that agenda. Now we have the same young people who ran over the genuine young people and messed up the whole protest. So how do we align these two sets of young people to become the children that Africa will be proud of in our education? They are above school age. We're not going to take them back to school. Most of them in the universities. Some of them have graduated. How do we change their minds? I think that should be our worry. I don't know whether I made anything here.
Thank you very much, sister. Thank you. We see the youth is quite a focus. We're talking the youth. When we talk the youth, we're talking future, right? We're talking future. It's not just focusing on the youth as such, but focusing on the future. Who do we become? Where are we going to? And how do we get there? So let me go to my brother, Teboho, and pick your brains on that. Where do we go from here? Where what kind of Ubuntu do we need in order to emerge from COVID-19?
Thank you so much, Beatrice. I think my brother and my sisters hit the nail on the head. I think I would agree, education is the key. But I think one of the first things that we need to do, particularly as Africans, we need to retrace our steps back and find where we faulted. We need to find the fault lines. Because I'm sitting here listening to my brother and my sisters here, and when one goes back before colonialization and apartheid here in South Africa, for an example, you find that many of our leaders at the time equipped themselves with education, and some of these values that we are talking about, they were tried and tested The only challenge, I think, came with colonialization, as Dr. Wilson said. During colonization and during the apartheid era, in particular here in South Africa, I think when we allowed a situation where, insofar as religion and culture is concerned, allowed the missionaries coming into our shore and now teaching us what our forebears has taught us, but distorting it in such a way that we frown at ourselves, we doubt ourselves, and even doubt our skin color, and start to believe that anything that is white is anything good. It is so unfortunate that even some of the smartest people today, they have fallen into that trap of thinking that everything that is white is quality and is good. For an example, let's look into South Africa. If you take leaders like Oliver Tambo, like Nelson Mandela, Albert Luthuli, and many of them who traveled the world and preached these values of Ubuntu, they equipped themselves with education. And that was shortly after colonization of South Africa. And after we gained our independence, and some before, and some of them got education in London and abroad, elsewhere. But they were never moved. They were very clear in terms of what they want. They were very clear in terms of what they are prepared to die for. And they were never selfish. They shared their ideas, they shared their vision of what the world should look like. Many of them died in the process. Many of them survived to realize our freedoms. And unfortunately, by the time we got our independence, as South Africa in particular, many of them were already old and had to depart this world. And then those who were left behind, the seed of the enemy, because there's no doubt that as all this goodness was planted in us, at night the enemy came and planted the seed of deceit, the seed of greed, the seed of corruption, the seed of jealousy, the seed of individualism, and all those negative tendencies came in and became the new normality in our culture and eroded everything good that we were taught. There's nothing wrong, I would argue, with any religion, be it Christianity, be it the Hindus, the Muslims, and everybody, including the Bible and the Quran and everything. But what I find fault at is the people who teaches it to achieve selfish advantage. Even today, you still find people doing that. And it's a seed that is growing, and it can be traced as far back as when colonialism came into Africa, and then slavery and all those things, and apartheid. It was even worse here in South Africa due to apartheid. That is why even today, our brothers and sisters, they are not proud of being Africans. They still want to live like the Asian people, like the European people, and all the styles, all the languages and everything. But with education, which is also what I'm advocating, we need to be careful as to who teaches us.
That's right.
Kids. What are our children taught at school? It should only not also start at school. I agree with Dr. Ethel. Unfortunately, all these things also resulted in a family nucleus being broken. We've got so many child-headed families because of AIDS, because of now this COVID, because of all these diseases that were thrown at us as Africans. But we need to rebuild our families, and it's only through love and compassion that we can do that. And when we say people must love one another, we are not saying hate yourself and love a white man. No. That's not what our forefathers taught us. Love starts first with yourself. Love yourself first and love your brother. And then we should not be apologetic about how we come together as Black nation. One thing that is also troubling us today is that when it comes to our own unity as Black people, independent from other nations, we are so apologetic and think that we can never survive without them. Yet, when you look at them, they are so united that they believe that they can survive without us, that they can only from us get what? The dollars and the rents, as much as the nairas and everything. And they are not apologetic. So I'm quite happy that Dr. Nelson is talking about them to open a school in South Africa. That is a good initiative that needs to be supported. But I'm appealing, my brother, the type of teachers that you employ and educate, let it be people who will teach Africans their way of life, not come with Western ideas of being selfish and living like white people and stuff like that. And I lastly would want to agree fully with Dr. Ethel and Dr. Blackwook that it's about time that we mobilize the goodness and kindness in our midst, and don't allow ourselves to be driven by an organization that rewards selflessness, negative competition, and embrace mediocrity. Because today, particularly here in South Africa, mediocrity is rewarded above everything. And our youth thinks that if they can lay their hands on money through whatever means, then they would have arrived. And as a result, many of them, they don't complete their studies. They think that running into politics is the new normal. And we have seen now the way, I think, the way the world is moving so fast with this industrial revolution, we are lagging far behind. And if we don't change and with speed correct all these wrong things, I think we can be a better nation and a better people. It will take time, of course. Some of the things will not happen in our lifetime, unfortunately, but starting now, it will be a good beginning, because we know that back in the years, African people were united people and African people were strong. And it was because of already mentioned, and I think that would be my contribution on that.
Thank you so much, brothers and sisters. We are having a real thought-provoking conversation. We have people joining on Facebook. If you're out there, please, the Ubuntu Books page is where we see comments. If you're on any other page on Facebook and you're texting comments, we can't see you. From the Ubuntu Books page, we can see your comments. We can take your questions. And Dr. Dabo says, please let us take time to heal our hearts and then minimize the time that we talk about our pain, 5%, maximize the time that we talk about our present and the future, 90%. Thank you. So before I hand that over to you, I want to quickly take us back to history. And because we've been talking about education, I think when we talk about education, we have different aspects that we have to bear in mind. First of all, the concept of education that we need, and what content do we have? We have a long conversation going on now about decolonizing education, but the question is, what kind of contents are out there? What kind of contents do we have when it comes to implementing the kind of African-based education that we're talking about? So Ubuntu Book specializes on that. That's where our content, that we create lots of content. At the moment, we're creating flashcards just to enable people to learn history. You see this book, I just have to show you this one. This is Black Wisdom. It's a collection of the quotes of some of the great people that we're talking about. I have over 350 of them in here. And we have over 1,000 quotes in here that come from history. And again, someone said, my brother said we can't falsify history. So it's in there, and I think these are some of the contents that we really need to use in order to, direct education in the channel that make our children to be proud of their skin color, to be proud of their vast and rich African heritage, and to just embrace themselves, And while we focus on education, I think Brother Wilson said there's also healthcare, there is finances, and I would say the consumption styles, our consumption styles. What are we buying? What are we consuming, from our food right down to what we wear and what we decorate our houses with? Where do we spend our holidays? So our consumption habits is something that we really need to look to. When I ask children the question, where will you go to if you had a scholarship? Go to Accra, Ghana, or go to New York? Of course, ask yourself that question, and it's obvious. And then you can ask yourself, why does it have to be that way? What answer do you have? I mean, we're not being judgmental, but the question is, just creating that awareness within ourselves of the choices that we make, the consumption decisions that we make. And attached to that, I'd like to take us to one other area that is so key, which is entertainment. In the space of entertainment, so much can go wrong there, and so much can go right. The kind of images that we put out, the kind of conversations, especially when we become influential, our musicians, what are we singing about? What is the content of what we're putting out? How educational is that, or how detrimental is that? I think the area of the things that we're watching, what kind of representation is in the movies that we watch, the kind of entertainment that we have. I think that's one area that we need to really focus on as well. Journalism, how do we do reporting? How do we speak about Africa? What kind of images do we put out there? What is the choice of words? When I still hear people talk about slaves, that's a language that was put out there at the time when slavery was happening. But were our ancestors born slaves? No, they were born human beings. So I see them as enslaved Africans. I think that's where we really have to shape our minds, go within and ask, where do we have our information for? For what purpose was that information? And how valid is it today going forward after COVID-19? So again, the question is, how do we practice Black humanism? How do we practice Black humanity? And I'll put this as the last but one question out to all of you. Please, let's take just a few minutes to answer to that, because I want to have another closing question. There are no questions coming in from Facebook as yet, not from social media, but I see people engaging. So back to you. I will keep asking the question, how do we practice Black humanism, bearing in mind the space of education, the space of healthcare and wellness, finances, economic and business, entertainment, all of that. How do we practice Black humanity in those spaces going forward after COVID-19?
So I think specifically, because I like to give people specific things to do. So there's a couple things that we're doing on the mother continent that we try to do here. And actually, I'm more encouraged about the progress in Africa than I am in the United States for a couple of reasons. But the bottom line is, when Dr. Ethel, when you talked about the way that the young people were protesting and kind of were counterproductive to what you were trying to do, the problem is they don't have anything, and you're not doing anything. Like I work with teenagers. If you look at the civil rights movement here, it was led by teenagers. It was led by high school students, by college students. It always has to be them because A, they have energy, and B, they're not afraid of anything. And C, they really have nothing to lose and no responsibilities. So they always have to lead the charge. But they've been isolated. Why? Because they have no home base. So we would have to invest in the community so that they feel like they have something. There's nothing wrong with what they're doing. Like, they want to fight, and fighting is necessary. Apartheid is not that old. That's like what, 91, 92? Fighting is, if you think, I don't know why people believe that we can be murdered in the streets and we're just going to hold up signs and that's balance. Like, these young people are violent and angry because they're frustrated. They have no home base. there's nothing that they can return to. So we want them to be proud as Black, but we're not giving them anything to be proud of. So the first thing that would have to happen in order to engage them is to say, here's what you can be proud of. So the first thing is invest in your community. So for me, it's look at Alex, for my brother that's inside. Look at Alex, look at T.M.V, look at Soweto. Invest there. Why? Because that's where the people are. I should not go there and all the corner stores are not owned by us. I should not, when I was trying to do my paperwork for permanent residency in Joburg, why did I have to get a copy made across the street from a Chinese owner? It makes no sense to me. I was not in China. Like, there are opportunities in our own communities to show strength, to give people a home base. So when you're talking about what to do, invest in your own space so that we have something. We can't tell them to be proud of nothing. And then the other part is just what you were talking about. Even when you mention the music, one of the things I love about South Africa is the 80-20 rule, where 80% of that content needs to come from local artists. I think that's beautiful. Unless that 80% is just going to mimic American music. So there's got to be an overall concept of identifying the beauty. And it's not just philosophy. There are actionable things. So again, investing in your own community. That's the number one thing. And as Dr. Ethel mentioned, it's not really enough now for us. There's so many gaps with a lot lack of family. We have the same issues here in the state. I know as a Black man, it's not enough for me to just take care of my own kids. I have to try to reach out to the community. You know how many young Black men there are that don't have fathers? So I have to be an example to all of them in everything that I do. So those are the things that there are actionable things that we could be doing. Think about how you spend your dollars. Think about it's little things, how you wear your hair, the makeup you buy, the clothes that you wear. Get back to who we are. I mean, those are things that everyone can do. Are you supporting your local community, especially after COVID-19, because the Black community has always hit the hardest and first. So if we're going to rebuild us. Those are the things. I mean, there's things we can be doing. It doesn't just have to be lip service. There's work that we have to do. So those are the things.
Thank you so much. Thank you, my brother. Let's see who is giving us the next contribution. How do we practice Black humanity without having bad feelings, without being apologetic? How do we start? Where do we start? And how do we do that? Bearing in mind that our different sectors of life, our different spheres of life, how do we bring it in? And Sister Biso just dropped a question on Facebook. How do we practically get to unlearn the selfish practices that are characteristics of the systems like colonialism versus the collective spirit of Ubuntu?
I think I'd like to take Tabiso's question.
Yes, sis, go.
Tabiso said, how do we unlearn? That means that we learned selfishness, right? If we learn selfishness, we can unlearn it. But before you can learn from a teacher, you have to trust the teacher. When you don't trust the teacher, you can't learn. I always told my kids that I wanted to read medical sciences, but I got to a point where my physics teacher was somebody that I couldn't understand. I just didn't like his hairstyle. Imagine a child. The only thing I could think of was his hair was full. Why would he leave his hair full? And that kind of discouraged me from learning physics, even though I was very good in sciences. So I couldn't study medical sciences. So if you don't like your teacher, or you don't trust your teacher, you're already prejudiced against your teacher. For instance, let me take a detour. Let me just make a little detour. Assuming I have the solution for somebody who thinks I'm a foreigner in an African land, and I'm talking to you saying, listen, you have to change your mindset. Your selfishness doesn't get the problem solved. I grew up inside what they call Ubuntu. Like Dr. Wilson said, we can adapt what we know. We can adapt, we can make adjustments here and there. You bring from Cameroon what seems to be like Ubuntu. I bring from West Africa. Somebody brings from South Africa. We adapt. Now, what if you don't trust me? The first thing you think is, Nigerian, she's looking for something. Or I would say, oh, these Cameroonians, oh, they are not, we have all kinds of stereotypes. How do we begin to change our mind? The person that could help me might be somebody I don't like. I don't like their accent. I don't like what they eat. But that person has a solution for me to detox myself from my selfishness. So how do we do with the trust issues in Africa? How do we do with sibling rivalries in Africa? There's rivalry between Ghana and Nigeria. There's rivalry between South Africa and Algeria. All kinds of things happening in Africa. How do we attempt to resolve the issue of trust? We know, like Tabiso said, somebody sowed, or some people sowed that kind of seed in us. How do we get it out of our system and begin to ingest the new philosophies of Africanness and Ubuntu? We can't build on top of the ground. We must till the ground. We must remove some things and put in some things. When are we going to be able to tell ourselves that, look, no matter what we have faced, there's always the future. There's little or nothing we can do about the past. Let it be our experience learning board. And then let us spring forth from there and work. The work is big, like Teboho said. The work is enormous. We can start, like you said, Dr. Wilson, but we may not finish it. We may just start the work for the next generation, but it must begin from somewhere. We must first of all dig the ground and remove the distrust among Africans. Every African is not a crook, for instance. Every Nigerian is not a criminal. Every South African is not from a broken home. There are people that have different things they can offer to our society. But we must have to disabuse our minds from the prejudices of the past if we must learn the way forward. So learning the way forward begins with trust. We have to learn trust again. We have to learn to look at ourselves not only as Nigerians or West Africans or South Africans, but as Africans. The reason I said what I said is because I have had the opportunity to meet some people in very high positions in government. You bring your idea, the first thing they think is, who is bringing this idea? This one is a foreigner. They either find a way to take it away from you, or they find a way to kill the idea. Yet, it is for the progress of a particular people, because they don't trust that you have the best intentions. I remember one time, we took a particular shelter. We were funding this shelter of men and women sleeping on the ground in a dirty environment. We took a group of young men and women, cleaned up the place, tried to get them to be okay, fed them all the time. One day they woke up and said, maybe you're getting money from the government and you're not giving us everything. I promise you, not a cc, not a cent was coming from anybody, but from our personal bosses. So how do we change that kind of mindset? We have to change the way we think about people that are not from our countries, though we are Africans. The issue of xenophobia is just one thing that people fed into the air. I am a PhD. I'm not looking for anybody's job. I can survive anywhere in the world with my PhD. And then somebody looks at me and says, oh, because you're a Nigerian, you want to take my job. Can you do what I can do? So let's be honest. Let's attempt to be honest, truthful, and then change the way we think about ourselves. Maybe help will come from the rest of Africa for Africa. That's just all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sister Esther. I know we're going to get there. Thank you for answering that question. I think there's something that I just want to interject in there from Steve Biko and from Marcus Garvey. Steve Biko said, change the way people think and things will never be the same again. So change the way people think and things will never be the same again. And the question that I want to put on the table is, how do we change some of these things? I know Sister Ethel has given us some ways on how to do that. And I want to say, sometimes the reason why we treat ourselves the way we do is because of ignorance, because we don't know our history, because we don't know our past, because we don't know our common future, because we don't know each other. And I think we can continue to blame this ignorance on someone else. It is upon us. It is upon us. And in our household, the question is, what conversations are we having with our children, with our families? Sometimes we preach and then we do different things. And I always want to say, our children are watching us. Our neighbors are watching us. Our audience is watching us. And they're probably not listening to what we're saying, but watching what we're doing. Just like my brother, Dr. Wilson, said, we have to go by example. So I think we got to take a responsibility to say, what are we teaching each other about us, about Black humanity? How do we go about teaching that? And how do we embrace each other in spite of our differences? How do we see those differences as being complementary and not as a dividing factor? How do we go about looking beyond the passport, the name of the country where you come from, and looking into what Dr. King says, the content of our character and our qualifications, or what we bring to the table? I think there's so much that needs to be done on that part. This one symposium is not going to change that. Again, it's just the starting point of a series of conversations that we will have. The next one coming in from 1st December to the 5th of December, where we have 3 sessions every day planned, and we're touching on every aspect. And the intention is to break down Ubuntu from something that someone thinks is imaginary. Someone said Ubuntu is a romantic concept. And I think there is so much into that concept that we can break down, but then we have to make it practicable. We have to make it understandable. We have to bring the values to the people, the principles. We have to know how to operate it, by Ubuntu. And I think Dr. Alecia has done so much work in that the book on Ubuntu Pedagogy. It's something that is recommendable for every household, for every teacher. And I think every school that we're having, that book should be the book that is, used to set curriculum. And it's something that we really need to do. There are quite a lot of books on Ubuntu out there. I've done some research, but I think the books that really make the concept practicable, that makes it, understandable, is what we really need, because that is what we're gonna need after this pandemic to get back on our feet. And so we are running, we're almost coming to the close of this. And what I would like to ask you all is something that comes from one of the great minds that I'm picking on. It was Rosa Parks. She said, when my day come, I want to, what is it? I need to find it. You have to give me a break to find that one. I have to find that one. Where do I have it? It should be on this sheet of paper. Yes. So I want you to reflect, if today was going to be like your last day on earth, or no, not the last day. It shouldn't be the last day. If you were going to plan the rest of the days of your life, starting from today, let me put it that way. You're going to plan the rest of your life starting from today. What legacy would you like to leave behind? What will you want to be remembered by? What will be your legacy? So you're starting from today based on all the things that we've discussed, bearing Ubuntu in mind, thinking about, prioritizing ourselves and loving ourselves, thinking about Black humanity. If today was the first day of the next chapter of the rest of your life, what are the 3 things that you're going to put on that first chapter? That will become your legacy, that you want people to remember you by when your time comes and you're gone. Anyone can pick.
I think it's I'm muted. No, I think it starts from my actions, the things that I do. How do I extend my humanity on a daily basis to be able to even help my brothers, my sister, my brothers in the street? It doesn't matter who it is, but the work, not just talking, or writing about it, but really doing the work and to be able to showcase how to be able to help our brothers and sisters to move to the next level. So it all comes down to the work that I'm doing to be able to help. And then I also wanted to touch on the piece with trust. I think the trust comes from trusting yourself first, to be able to trust yourself so that you can show up. It doesn't matter where you go, to be able to assist others in helping them by just your actions in the things that you are doing, that they will see it through that. But it is a complex problem, and we know that there's many variables to it, and it's a constant work that we have to do to be able to help our people to get to a place that we're not devaluing or dehumanizing others in our actions and the things that we say. So it starts with us.
Thank you so much, Alecia. Let's see which of my brothers and sisters want to pick the stick and run. If today, the way that you write the
I will. Actually, I wanted to answer a question that someone asked on Facebook about how do we plan to take this to the streets where the common person may not read or hear this broadcast. I'm really excited to get to work. Obviously, because of COVID, I haven't been able to get back home, which I call South Africa home. I haven't been able to get back home since, I think that was February. And so, but because of COVID, I kind of been stuck here. So I got a couple more months and then I can get back over. We're really excited to get to work because there's a coordinated effort. Like I said, like I mentioned to my brother, I mean, you got to go into Alex, you got to go into Tembisa, you got to go into Soweto and talk to the people, you know, at all levels. So the school that will be opening starts at grade R. So we're talking about young, but then there's also some programming that we'll be running that are involved with pretty much matrix level or teams. And everything in between, and developing those relationships, because everybody has a role in this. If you talk about Ubuntu, you talk about together. That means that my people in Santon and Melrose Arch and those places, they still have to be engaged. Because one of the things that we can't do is minimize people's contributions because they don't meet the definition of what we think they should be. Everybody's got to play in their lane. There's somebody who works in a suit that can get some things done that kid that doesn't have a suit can't get, but vice versa. There's some things that kid can do that doesn't own a suit that the guy in the suit, a space he can't move in. So it's about speaking to everybody and having an overall goal of loving us, but it has to work in various components. And so I think for me, when I die, I want people to say he tried, he worked hard, he made an effort to make a change, and then somebody else has got to take the baton. I can only run my leg, and I'm going to die, and somebody's got to pick up and run the next leg. I'm going to run my leg as hard as I can. And that's what all I'm looking for, is for everybody to run their leg as hard as they can. That's pretty much it.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
My brother Teboho, my sister Ether.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, sister. I think just one thing that I forgot to raise earlier on is the issue of a need for us as Africans to rise in our numbers and get Africans writing history books that properly tell us about, books that tell us about African history. Because if you check even now at schools, there are so many history books, but they are not even written by Africans. They are written by Europeans and white people and stuff like. And interestingly, you know, at some point I was in Lesotho and I met this historian who was rewriting the history of Lesotho. And when you read that and compare with what is already in the shelves in Lesotho and in universities, you find that people were fed poison throughout the years. So I think it's about time that as African, we rise in our numbers and rewrite the African history in a proper context. And lastly, I think for me, because all structures are there, institutions are there, it's not like we are starting from afresh. We need to continue raising this topic at every corner, wherever we are, but we need willing leaders also who will be able to stand up and reevaluate the appropriateness of our economic policies, strategies and tactics, as well as social relations to the value of all humanities. And we should not be apologetic when doing that, because one of our weaknesses these days is that our leaders will say this thing today, tomorrow they point us to another direction, which is clearly a compromise position. And gradually we end up moving away from what we intend to achieve as Africans. But I think we want to go back to our roots. I think Dr. Ethel said it, that you can't plant on the soil, you must till the earth first. So we need to get our roots deeper and get these seeds of trust, the seed of love germinating, so that it grows and it grows and it grows and becomes what we want it to be at the end. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sister. My sister, Dr. Ethel, you wanted to...
Yes, I might not be able to make a complete difference, but I want to be able to throw the stone that will make a big ripple on the change of the narrative. What I mean is, I know that from where we are, from where I am, I might not be able to make that massive, impactful change that will change the whole of the narrative, but I want to be able to throw a stone that will bring a kind of shift in the way the youth of Africa think about who they are and where they want to be. Who they are, where they are, and where they want to be. Maybe in the next 50 years, if we are still here. But if we are not here, I want to be remembered as that woman, not like Rosa Parks or Winnie Mandela, but that woman that started from where I am to begin to impact the mindset of people concerning what we are as Africans, concerning especially our roots in the family. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We've been on for 2 hours, and we can go on and on and on and again. And we have raised so many issues that still needs to be addressed. And the good news is that this is not the end of this series. It's just a starting point. And some of you who are on the screen right now, you'll be coming back in the other rounds, and we will be inviting many more people to join the conversation because, again, we still have like about 15 sessions to cover around Ubuntu, because it is so important that we get to understand this concept. And this takes me to the question that was asked by Rose Yusuf, if we plan to take this to the street. Rose Yusuf, I invite you to join the conversation. I invite you to take part in all of this. It's not like this is the responsibility of my 4 experts who are here on the screen and myself to take this to the street. We all have a collective responsibility to teach anyone that is next to us. Some of us are fortunate to have awakened. Some of us are fortunate to have a higher degree of awareness, whether we got it from school or we got it through homeschooling. We have that degree of awareness, and our responsibility is to impact this to other people around us. Take someone around you, because I think the essence of being here is to be able to share what you have, what you know with someone, to take someone along the line, even if you know just one. If you know one, teach someone one, and 2 people will know one. Don't wait until you know from 1 to 5 to start teaching someone. And that is the concept behind the Ubuntu books. When I left Europe to come to Africa, I did not know that I was going to write books. So it started with 1 book, and today I have 22 books. The series Africa for Smart Kids, it's actually my journey. It's my quest for my African identity, my quest for my African history. And it has been such an enriching journey. It's not a journey that brings you money and you get rich overnight. People think 22 books, oh, you must be very rich. You don't sell books like we sell weaves and like we sell whatever. We don't buy books like our sisters go to the salon and do their nails. And I think that's something that we have to get at. But what I'm trying to put out is that these resources are out there. We write history from an African perspective. We write books about Made in Africa. We write about our ancestors. We have a book about the wonders of Africa. Do you even know them? And all of this are on www.globuntubooks.com. And I want to pick up on the word of my brother Teboho. We run master classes for first-time writers, specifically for first-time writers, because I know if someone who is wanting to write a book for the first time has a lot of challenges. You have a lot of challenges, fears, and all kinds of questions that you can't answer. And our master classes are here to help specifically Black brothers and sisters. And I think every woman and every man 40 plus is the highest time to start writing your first legacy book if you haven't written it. And that is why Globuntu Books is here in place. And it is here just to help you to write your first book, to help you to learn how to write, to shift your mind to that space, because there's so much that we need to write. Our home history, you can start by writing the history of your family. If you don't write about your great-grandparents, your grandparents, you don't write about your parents, your children may never know, but they will know about, so many other people abroad. And I think that's something that we have to know, that writing history doesn't mean that you write the history of Africa. It starts with writing the history of who you are, the history of your family, what is so familiar to you before it gets lost. So I know you all have something to do. I know, time is running out, and I really want to appreciate you for accepting the invitation to join this first conversation today. I'm hoping so very much to have you on board the next conversations, and I know I can count on you. Dr. Wilson, you know where to get resources when it comes to schools, and you know where to get the book, that gives you the curriculum, and you know who to talk to when it comes to setting your workplace in the new school that you want to open. Our sister, Dr. Ethel, is here, and when it comes to going through the bureaucracy of, policies and all of that, our brother Teboho is here, and I think a host of all other people. So we're here to say, let's put our hands together. We must not do it alone. We must not give up because we think that we can do it alone. We all have lots of ideas. So I'm inviting all of us to put our hands together. Our brother, Dr. Wilson, is going to be in Johannesburg in January. It is time that we all meet for a meal, and over an Ubuntu meal, we strategize, and those of our who on Skype, like this, so that they're part of that, because I think that is for me what it means to practice Black humanism, humanity. That is where it starts. It starts with us taking action. So again, thank you so very much for your time, and have a wonderful time. Stay safe, and I will send out information with regards to the next sessions. And I'll see you. Thank you so much. So if you have one final word to say, please just drop it, and then we'll close the session.
Medasi, thank you so much for having me here. And I'm just going to add to that plug. If you're looking for teacher trainers, I do that for your teachers. So teaching them about Ubuntu pedagogy. So I'll just put mine in there.
That is perfect. I need all of that. I do.
Okay.
For real. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you, brothers and sisters. May you have a fabulous weekend with your families, and I'll see you very soon.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.
All right.
Thank you.